In this video, I'd like to talk about how you can use the appositive to focus your writing. So let's look at these three sentences here. Just listen as I read them aloud. All right. Mr. Kim is a resident in our facility. He was found on the floor beside his bed at 2100 hours. Matthew Jones is an HCA. The HCA reported the incident to the unit supervisor. The supervisor on call that day was Martha Symes. Number 3, the specialist is a recognized expert in oncology, gastroenterology, and obstetrics. The specialist examined the patient and recommended the proposed treatment. The patient was Mr. Kim. I don't know if you noticed, but the sentences sound really choppy and repetitive. And it's hard to figure out, what's the main point here. Notice that also one or more of the sentences uses the verb to be. You can see is, Matthew Jones is, the supervisor was Martha Symes. So generally, we use short sentences to emphasize important ideas. So when you see a short sentence, it's an important idea. However, in these examples, some of the shortest sentences are details. They aren't the main issue. So that makes it hard to identify the main issue. For instance, here, Matthew Jones is an HCA. That's not the main point. The main point is that Matthew Jones, I assume here, reported the incident to the unit supervisor. That's the main point. All right. So appositives can be used to keep the less important material from distracting from your main points. And they can also help your writing sound less choppy and less repetitive. So what is an appositive? An appositive is a noun or a noun phrase that renames the noun that it follows, renames or restates the noun that it follows. It must immediately follow the noun that it describes. Okay, so that's really important. It comes immediately after the noun. It cannot be later on. A sentence with a to be verb can be made into an appositive sometimes if it has the same subject as the noun in the main sentence. So if both sentences have to be verbs, then you choose which is going to be, which information is the most important point that you want to get across. That's the main sentence. And then put the less relevant information, the least important information in the appositive. So let's look at some examples here. Mr. Kim, a resident in our facility, was found on the floor beside his bed at 2100 hours. That's a bit clearer than this first part here. Mr. Kim is a resident in our facility. He was found on the floor beside his bed at 2100 hours. The focus isn't very clear in that first sentence, but here the focus is very clear. The main sentence is Mr. Kim was found on the floor beside his bed at 2100 hours. There we go. Resident in our facility is extra information, and it repeats it renames Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim, a resident in our facility, was found on the floor beside his bed at 2100 hours. Notice not just the punctuation, but notice my intonation as I'm reading this. Okay, let's look at the second one. The HCA, Matthew Jones, reported the incident to Martha Symes, the supervisor on call that day. Here we get the information that the main idea is that the HCA reported the incident to Martha Symes. That's the key information. The other details are added in as less important details. Here, instead of commas, we have used dashes to separate out the appositive. The specialist, a recognized expert in oncology, gastroenterology, and obstetrics, examined the patient, Mr. Kim, and recommended the proposed treatment. So really what you want to say is the specialist examined the patient and recommended the proposed treatment. You could also, instead of dashes, you could use brackets. The specialist, a recognized expert in oncology, gastroenterology, and obstetrics, examined the patient, Mr. Kim, and recommended the proposed treatment. Let me just comment on the punctuation. Appositives are generally separated from the main clause using commas. That's the most common. All right. However, both dashes and parentheses can be used for clarity when the appositive is long and includes commas. So here in this appositive, a recognized expert in oncology, gastroenterology, and obstetrics, there's some commas here in the middle of this long appositive. And then if you separated it with commas, you said the specialist, comma, a recognized expert in oncology, comma, gastroenterology, comma, that would be confusing. All right. So when an appositive is long and includes commas, you can choose to use a dash or parentheses. Dashes emphasize something, and parentheses de-emphasize the information. Keep in mind when you're using an appositive, if it's in the middle of the sentence, you need 2 commas or 2 dashes or 2 parentheses.